Well, hello, Diana Annis. How are you today?
I am fabulous. I'm talking to Sue Pelland.
Well, I am Sue Pelland, and we are here on Sewing in Slippers with Sue. I am so pleased to have you as my special guest today, Diana. We have been friends for quite a long time, and I have such an admiration and respect for
Oh,
your vast knowledge in the quilting world. So, let me
well,
tell
thank you.
oh, my pleasure. Let me tell my people that are watching, how we met and how we get to be friends. And I have a terrible memory, Diana, so you might want to chime in there and jump right in and tell people how we met. But let me see if I remember. Yeah. Sorry, my son's asking me a question. Um, I want to see if I remember how we met. My recollection is that you belong to the Rhododendron Needlers Quilters Guild, and I
I
think I
do.
might have gone there and done a presentation. We might have met that way, but the way we really
I
got to
think we
know each
did.
other, the way we really got to know each other is through quilting. You were my very favorite professional machine quilter. So tell
Oh,
me about your
that
quilting business.
that's huge. That is really huge for me.
I'll talk to
Um,
you later.
my quil my quilting.
I can't talk now. Sorry. Go
Oh, those kids. Um,
ahead.
my quilting business is has evolved. I did machine quilting for customers for 21 years, and
Wow, 21 years.
yeah. And it was pretty intense because I'm known for my custom work, and that's what I love to do the most. And I'm tired, so I'm not taking any more customers, but I am teaching people how to do their own quilts, how to long
Oh,
arm them, how to
are you?
quilt them on their domestic machine. So
Okay,
yeah.
fantastic. I just noticed my whole screen is green. My face is green. I don't know what's wrong. I'm not sick. I'm good. But
You
anyway,
look great on
so
mine.
so you've been quilting for you said 21 years?
Well, I've been quilting professionally as a long armor for 21 years.
For
But
21 years. Fantastic.
I started in the 70s, the late 70s.
Oh, isn't
I
that
was still in
interesting?
Yeah, I was still in high school, and I picked up a McCall's magazine that had this big spread on the national um, quilt competition of 76.
Yeah.
And I was just enamored with it, thinking, why didn't anybody tell me about this? I just, I loved it. And you know who won that competition? Ginny
Who?
Byer.
Oh, amazing. So she was one of my
Yeah.
first teachers, right? She wrote the book on quilting back in
Yeah.
the 70s and 80s. So very
Right.
interesting. We have a parallel lives here, Diana, because that's the same time that I started quilting. Isn't that interesting? So
It
you
is.
started quilting for yourself, and then eventually you
Yeah.
got yourself a long arm and started quilting for others.
Mhm.
But now that's
Right.
evolved. Now you're teaching long arming and quilting
I'm
on your domestic.
I am, and it's going swimmingly. I love it, and
Excellent.
it's it's a little easier on my back
Yeah.
than
Yes.
being standing up and quilting all day. Excuse me, but I'm also studying to be a quilt and quilted textiles appraiser.
Oh, fantastic. Well, that's such an interesting job. What would be the process for somebody that wants to become an appraiser like that?
First thing you want to do is see what it entails.
Yeah, because I
Go to
know that
go.
you've been studying for this for years.
Yeah, I have. It really
Okay.
is. You know, I've heard this over and over. It's like studying for a master's all on your own.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I have. Uh, I would go to the aqs.com website and look into appraising classes, and
Yeah.
that sort of thing. There are appraising classes every year, and things change from year to year. Uh, but it's a lot of intensive study, a lot of uh, looking at every quilt you can possibly look at, and
Yes.
studying it because there's a criteria. But the it's a long, hard process, and you have to really be um, accepting that it's going to take you a while to go through the process. I
So
am doing,
you have to really be passionate
yeah,
about this to have that
yeah,
desire to
you
want to
really
teach
do.
yourself this
Yeah,
level of skill.
tremendous amount of history, and I love history, so that's right up my alley.
Ah,
Um, and
fantastic.
it entails doing live appraisals, and I do appraisals. I've been doing appraisals for about 3 years now, um, maybe four. Not certified yet, but there were 4 years that we didn't have any certified testing in the process, and you can only do it at Paducah. Um, but because of COVID, because of other issues, we haven't been able to test until last year. And by that time, there's a huge pool of people.
Yes.
So I was unable to get into the testing. There's only so many slots.
Yep.
So I'm going to try again this year.
Okay, very good. So you're going to Paducah to see if you can be tested as a certified appraiser. How cool is
I'm
that?
going I'm going to Paducah and take the classes again
Okay.
because like I said, things change every year.
Yes.
And then I have to apply to be in the
Oh, I
testing.
see.
So
I see. Well, good
so we'll
luck.
see how
That's
that
so
goes.
exciting. So,
Thank you.
Diana, I've had you do some appraisals for me because I was curious
Yes.
about some of my quilts. So that was kind of
Yeah.
fun because you're able to tell me so much about that process and what a quilt is worth. But what I really loved is one time I found a little discovery of some quilts on Facebook, and the first person I thought of was you. So I ran down to your
Oh,
house with my
yeah.
newly acquired quilts and showed them to you, and we had a blast going through those
Yeah.
quilts and looking at the fabrics in the quilts. Would you be able to do that with us right here? Do you have a quilt that you could
Absolutely.
tell us about?
I
I have some
can.
back here, but if you
I
have
can, I
taken one
can
out to look at, we can do that.
I have several. I can't actually give you a value on them because I haven't had them
Right.
appraised by another appraiser. I know what I
Yeah,
paid
I'm
for
really
them or what I didn't pay.
so I'm interested in two things. I'm
Okay.
interested in how you collect your quilts and how you know intuitively what what they're worth to you or what they might
Mhm.
be worth to an appraiser. And then I'm curious if you have any tips for collectors. So that's one thing
Oh,
I'm looking
yes.
for. But the other thing that
Yeah.
I'm really, really curious about, because I'm a textile girl, I grew up in the textile mills. My family worked in the textile mills for
Yeah.
years. And I am fascinated by the mills and I'm fascinated by the history of fabrics. And maybe you could, when we're looking at some samples, maybe tell us a little bit about the history of some of the fabrics that you might spot in my quilts or your own. Can you do
Sure.
that? Okay.
I can. So I only have one family quilt that is an antique from my great great grandmother, and she
Okay.
was not a an avid sower, but they were very poor farmers in down East Maine, Washington County, and had little.
Yeah.
And this quilt shows you that.
I love
so,
it. I'm going to see if I
so
can
I'll
make you
just
bigger on the screen and make me smaller so that we, oop, wrong way, wrong way. Let's see. I'm trying to find a different layout where you're going to be bigger, and that's
mhm.
not happening. All right, I guess that's not going to work. So we're just equal size. It keeps spotlighting me instead of you. So we're just going to go this way. How's that?
Oh,
All right.
there we go. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, good.
Okay. So this is the quilt that my great grandmother made, and I believe that she made it in the 20s or late 20s.
Okay.
And it's just It's just
Oh, the
a nice
butterflies.
butterfly quilt. Yeah, and that's all it
Excellent.
is. And it's on feed sack.
Oh, it
It's
is
on
on
real
feed
feed sack.
sack. Oh, so
Hmm.
just
And
plain
these,
white feed sack.
yes. And I have found just shadows of print, which it tells me they're feed sacks. It also has
Interesting.
the fabrics are all dress prints that
Yep.
are they're not
They're
feed
not feed
sack.
sacks. Okay, that's
No.
interesting. So she probably took her old house coats and dresses and
Right.
took the
Right.
usable parts or from her family members and took the usable parts and made those into
Right.
the applique butterflies. So I
Right.
love that it's applique. And was this just a
Yep.
top? I see some basting there. Is it just a top that you're
There
going to
is
finish?
basting. Nope. I have basted it, and I wanted to do a. Let me see. I have to go the opposite way.
Yeah, I can
I
see it.
want it is basted, and I want to hand quilt it. And I started that, and I am just a terrible hand quilter. I've been
Oh,
machine quilting all my life, so this will probably end up on the machine, but something very simple
yeah.
because it is a simple quilt.
Well, that's
It's
interesting that
not.
you said she was not really a seamstress, right? And
No, she wasn't.
her skills weren't that great. So you know what, Diana?
Right.
Your hand quilting would be perfect for that quilt. If you're not that confident with
Yeah,
your hand quilting,
actually,
that would probably be
yeah,
very
you're probably
appropriate for that
right.
quilt.
Yeah,
Hey,
you're
I
probably
have a
right.
butterfly quilt too. I brought my butterfly quilt out to show you. And this was in my mom's
Oh,
collection. And it's a similar
yeah.
quilt, isn't it? But this one was obviously
Yes.
done by somebody that was really, really skilled. See how the
Yes.
butterflies all come
Absolutely.
together in the center, and
Yeah.
the hand quilting is amazing.
Yeah.
But one of the problems with this quilt, it's got a lot of yellowing and staining on it. So is this something that quilters, when they're collecting, what are they looking for in a quilt that they want to purchase to collect? And what would they do with something like that butterfly quilt that really has some damage on it and it's all stained?
Can I see a couple more pieces of fabric in that?
Sure, sure. I just threw it on the
More of the
floor, but
butterflies? Yeah.
I'm gonna get it again. That's what I do. I grab something, then I throw it on the floor. Okay, so here's a couple of the butterflies. It looks like they're
Okay.
30s fabrics.
Yeah, that's what I think
Typical.
too.
Yeah, typical
I
30s
think they
fabrics.
are 30s.
And it has this beautiful
And
little border on it. And the
yeah,
beautiful little
it's,
border has quite a bit of damage. As you can see, one of the points is, or one of the rounded ends is cut right off.
yeah,
But it is beautifully done and
it
really a
is.
stunning collection of fabrics.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Beautiful. Really
that's what
beautiful.
I love
Now,
about these quilts is the fabrics.
the 30s and to the modern day, um, they are pretty stable dyes in the fabric, so it probably can be laundered. I wouldn't do
Okay.
it um, in the machine. What I do is I use a product. I use two products. I use one called Retro Clean,
Yeah, I've got
and
some of that.
following the directions that takes out a lot of yellowing, a lot of rust stains. Um, it really works nicely. Follow the directions. I usually put it in a big tub, like a Sterilite tub, of the solution, put the quilt in and get it completely saturated. And then I put a cover on it and I let it sit. And I let it sit for about 24 hours.
Okay. Oh,
And then
that's
I
interesting.
take it out and squeeze out as much of the extraneous water as I can. I have a front loader washing machine. So what I do is I put it in the front loader and I put it on a rinse and spin. And that gets it, it doesn't do a lot of the spinning. It just sits on the barrel, on the outside of the
Yeah.
barrel.
Doesn't it doesn't
Um, it
stress those
doesn't agitate
fibers.
it.
Yeah.
Right, right. So rinse and spin to get all of the solution out of it. And then I put it up on I have a large design wall, and I put it up on my design wall and block it to dry. if you don't have a design wall, you can spread it out on a bed, let it hang over, whatever sides it needs to, and let it dry for a few hours. And once it's completely dry, your quilt is good to go. But you'll be
Okay,
surprised
cool.
at how clean it comes out. The
Yes,
whites are
yes.
whiter, the colors are brighter. Yeah, it's
So
nice.
that
I
so
use
that quilt
another
would be a
product
good
too.
candidate for the retro
It
clean.
probably
Yeah.
would. Anything before 1930, I don't wash. I just don't.
Okay.
Unless it's a piece of red work that was done all in turkey red, I don't wash.
Okay. Anything before 1930. Okay. I'm writing down some of these tips because I'd love to
Yeah,
include a couple of tips from you in my newsletter. So thank you for that.
yeah,
So the 30s quilts, those are very distinctive, and I can even tell a 30s quilt. In
yeah,
fact, when we went together to Brimfield, I picked up
yes.
this quilt made from 30s fabrics, which I love. It's such a beautiful quilt.
I do too.
Um,
It is.
it was really funny that we went to Brimfield together and we both spotted this quilt. I grabbed it right away and I just grabbed the quilt, put it in my pile, and I never even spread the quilt out to look at it. Do you know what this
Yeah.
quilt is? It's two quilts put together. I
Oh,
think I think what happened was that somebody had made these quilts for twin beds and
oh
then
yeah.
they got rid of their twin beds. So they put two twins together to make like a king size quilt. And I'm pretty sure that's what they did here, Diana. But the funny part is that they didn't know what they were doing when they put it together. And all they did was make a big back seam between the two halves. So this is probably not a quilt that I should have collected because it really is very poorly done, poor quality of that adding the two together. I should have taken my time, spread it out, and known what I was buying. So do you have some
Hmm.
tips for collectors on what to look for? I mean, obviously
Oh
you're going to look for a
yes.
quilt that's
Yeah.
not cut in half.
Well, that has a story behind it, and there's a
It
couple of
does have a
different
story.
scenarios. There,
This is
it could
my
have
theory.
been,
That's my theory.
yes, it could have been one quilt in the beginning and cut in half for two twins. And then when the
Yeah,
twins weren't being used in because those kids grew up, it was sewn back together.
that's very
So
possible as well.
it could have been that too. And
Yeah.
I hear that story quite a bit. So I do think that story has some validity.
Oh,
Um,
interesting.
so it's nice to have. Well, it could have been this, it could have been that. To at least have an idea of what happened. Years ago,
You, the
decades ago.
quilt, the quilt
So
history. Yeah. And
yes, yeah.
one of the things that I noticed, and I've looked everywhere, it is not signed or dated.
Mhm.
So let's talk
Right.
about collecting quilts and what are you looking for when you're looking for a quilt to add to your collection?
I look for a quilt. Condition is everything, and that's what I look for first is condition. I bought a quilt that day also, a fan quilt. I love it. It's beautiful. I didn't happen to pull it up here, but it has no date, no initials, nothing on it.
Yeah.
Um, and I love it anyway. But it's one of the things that I also teach is label making, because that's going to tell people decades from now where these quilts came from. Um,
Yes.
so when I look for a quilt, I do look for that, although I know from experience I'm not often going to find it
Yeah.
unless it's an signed quilt, which is what we call a signature quilt. Um, and and sometimes they aren't signed, but they're dated, which is
Oh,
another fun thing
interesting.
about.
Yes.
Um, but I
Oh,
have,
I have one like that. Let me
yeah,
grab that one. And then so you're definitely looking for either a label or a date or something that indicates the maker.
yes,
But if you fall in
Yes,
love with a quilt, you buy it anyway, don't you?
I do anyway. Yes, I do because I'm not a snob.
You're not a collecting snob. That's funny. Well,
I'd like to be, but
this beautiful Christmas quilt, which of course we collect because it's applique, right? I love to collect
yeah,
applique
yeah.
quilts. This one actually has a date on it somewhere. So tell me a little bit about what I have here because I have no idea. I just know it's beautifully quilted. It's beautifully appliqued, and the colors are so vibrant. I have a feeling it's not a very old quilt. What do you think?
Well, I would have to look at it in person to really be sure. Solids, 1967. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it is a reproduction of an antique quilt. That's an
Yes,
antique
exactly.
pattern.
Yeah, isn't it beautiful?
Yeah, it is. It really
Yeah,
is.
I love this one. This was part of my mom's collection, and when she downsized, it became part of my collection.
Yeah. It's very hard to tell dates on solid fabric quilts. It's
Yes.
one of the ways that we do is from the weave of the fabric
Oh, isn't
because
that interesting?
different decades had different styles. So
Okay.
in the weave of the fabric. So yeah.
Interesting. And that depends on what type of machines they were woven on.
It also depended on economy. And if
Okay.
there was like during the Industrial Revolution, fabrics were spun out really quickly and a lot.
Yeah.
And those fabrics are pretty thin and
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
wear as well.
They wanted to extend
Yeah.
their cotton supply, so they had very, fewer cotton
Well,
fibers in the
probably
yarns.
probably, but they
Yeah.
had to get a lot of fabric out quickly
Yeah.
to the masses because that's what people wanted and that was their livelihood was to be able to clothe their family and so a lot of fabric was put out very quickly.
Would that
um,
be things like the shirtings? Is that era?
yes, yes,
Okay,
late
because I
1800s
find those to
after the
be
Civil
fairly,
War.
yeah, I find those to be fairly thin fabrics, but I didn't know
Yes,
why.
they are.
Okay, so I have these blocks, which I know you were admiring one
Oh
time.
yes, yes, I do. I
And
love those.
tell me what you think these are. And I think I know, but I want to hear about these pinks and the browns because this is a pink and brown quilt basically.
Which
Oh,
is very common,
yeah.
very common. I have pink.
Oh, look at you. You have pink to finish this
Yeah,
quilt.
I have a
So
lot of pink.
tell me
These
about
are
these
called
pink fabrics.
these are called double pinks and or cinnamon pinks, and they were made. Well, of course, New England was the hub of textile making, and then after the Civil War, it's that started coming south. So you see a lot of mills in um, mid-Atlantic and southern states. Um, but these were, these are authentic antique pieces that I bought from someone who did a whole series of, 50 quilts in miniature of antiques, and she used antique
Oh,
fabrics in all of them.
wow.
Stunning, stunning collection. So these are probably made in the mills in New Hampshire and Lowell.
The
So
mills
you're
in New
looking at,
Hampshire, would that be Kachiko Mill?
yes, yeah.
Oh, I just visited there recently. It was fascinating.
Oh, I love those. I
S-
love going through
So,
those.
so the double pinks were made at that Kachiko Mill. I suspected that was the
Yes,
case. Okay,
and
cool.
they were made in Lowell and other mills in the area, and they're still being made today. They've been reproduced since their inception.
Ah,
They're very popular.
I think that one of yours might be one of mine.
Oh yes, yes,
Is
yes,
that the same
yes.
fabric right there?
I am looking.
I think it is.
Is it that one?
No,
Nope.
it's very close, but it's not the same. Isn't that interesting? So why are they called double pinks, Diana?
Because it's a light pink and a medium pink and a dark pink.
Okay, okay, and some white area where they've just left it open.
Yes.
Oh, okay, beautiful. Well, I just love these squares, and these were given to me by my very good friend Aggie Keeney from Portsmouth, Rhode Island. And she had acquired
Uh,
these from an antique shop or a quilt shop, and she fell in love with them, but then didn't do anything with them. And she gifted them to me. And some of these brown fabrics, look at that one.
yes. Yeah.
Aren't
Those
they
are
spectacular?
late 1800s, probably the last quarter of the 1800s. Yeah. We call those the brown years.
The brown years. Now, do you see
There's
that
a
little
lot of brown.
background print with the
Yes.
black and white? I
Yes.
have that in a
Sure do.
modern print.
Oh, yes. I have it
This
too.
has been
Yeah.
reproduced, right? For years and years and
Yes.
years it's been
Years and years.
reproduced.
Yep.
So does that make dating quilts really difficult?
Sometimes. Sometimes because when you date a quilt, you date it from the youngest fabric. The youngest fabric in that quilt. When when you look at quilts from the 1800s and early 1900s, I'm saying 25 years, over and even closer to today's date, people passed on their fabrics,
Mm,
grandmothers to mothers to daughters. And so some of these quilts have fabrics that are far older than the quilt was actually made. So that's
right.
one of the things that we do when we're dating. Um, and you'll see reproductions even into the 1900s from fabrics that were printed originally in, say, 1850,
Oh,
1870.
wow. I didn't realize that you'd
It,
see reproductions even then. Isn't
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
interesting?
yeah.
Oh, so that must make your
Um,
job so difficult.
sometimes you
Yeah.
can tell by the color. Sometimes the dyes are a little different
Mm-hmm.
than in the reproductions than they are in the originals. So it's always nice to have samples of of actual antique fabric, original fabric, and I do. I have boxes and boxes of antique fabric, but
Okay.
it's fun to go through the box and just and feel them and study them and understand where they came from and where um, what was original, what wasn't a reproduction, and why.
Oh, it's
So those
fascinating,
things
Diana.
all go into it.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
and I have a quilt here that I wanted to show you. I
Oh,
was
good.
given, I joined a challenge with the Florida Quilt Study Group. And what I did was I received a block from the 1800s. It was probably about 1880. And I had to take that block and use it in any way that I wanted, up to 24 inches square. And and so I had an old quilt somebody had given me that was really what we call a cutter quilt because there was there was too much damage on it, a lot of dry rot, that sort of thing. So I found pieces that I could use out of it. I still have that. I'll use more of it at some point. But what I did was let me show you, I'm going to show you, grab a block.
So I have a couple of questions for Diana when she comes back. And Diana, one of my questions was you said your cutter quilt, there are pieces of it you could use. Is there any way to
Mhm.
stop that further damage from happening so that you can use it and know it's going to stay
Yeah.
intact?
Not on this quilt, no. And
No.
the dry rot is extensive.
What is dry rot
Um,
exactly? What does that mean?
Dry rot is like if you have a quilt that has sat in an attic for decades, it gets hot, it's cold, it gets hot, it gets cold. And the fabric just deteriorates from that
just starts to
kind
fall
of
apart.
structuring. It does. It tears easily. You can poke
Hmm.
your finger through the fabric,
Okay.
and so it's a that's a mechanism of telling whether something is going to be okay or not. When you're
Yeah.
looking at antique quilts, you don't want to be able to put your finger through it.
No,
so,
no, for sure. It almost turns to dust in your fingers.
so
Okay,
this is the
so,
block that I was given,
okay, yeah.
and this is what I turned it into.
Oh, how beautiful. Oh, it's
And
lovely, Diana.
the whole thing is made from original fabrics, antique fabrics, except the little hexagons. Most
Okay.
of those, some of those are original, but most of it was reproduction fabric. So
Now,
just that little bit.
did you actually take those fabrics apart and re-sew everything, or did you use the
I
existing
did.
seams in that piece? You re-sewed everything.
I re-sewed everything. I took everything apart, and I what I did with
Fascinating.
the block was I exploded it so that I used each border.
Yeah.
Um, and it just exploded out the fabrics. But that one also has pink in it.
Oh, beautifully
But
done. Beautiful.
it was fun, and it got to hang at the National Quilt Museum, not National Quilt Museum, excuse me, the Quilters Hall of Fame in Indiana.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, so it was part of a
Yeah,
larger project, and that whole project hung at the Quilters Hall of Fame.
right. Right.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think we need to do a group quilt project. So,
Oh,
for a collector that has a collection of blocks like this,
mm-hmm.
what would a collector do with something like this? Is it
Oh, you
prudent to leave them
absolutely.
as blocks and just do absolutely nothing and just love them as they
Some people
are?
do. Some people
Or,
do.
yeah, or would people
But
really make a quilt out of this?
all the time, all the time.
Okay.
I have one
So
that
it's
I'm putting
really
together now.
So it's really personal preference. Are you just going
Yes,
to admire them and respect them, or are you going to put them to their intended use?
right. I have
Okay.
some miniature nine, not miniature, but pretty small 9 patch blocks from the early 1900s, and in excellent condition. And I'm putting them together. They're coming
Oh,
out beautiful.
okay. Well, let me give you another quilt for inspiration then. You talked about miniature 9 patches. This is one of my treasures
Yeah.
that I acquired
Yes.
on my own. And I got this from a local antique shop right here in Upton. And there's a pair of these. They are two twin quilts.
Oh, nice.
And one of them is quilted beautifully. You can see the feathered wreaths
Yes.
and the
Yes.
cable design. And the other
Yeah.
one, I think the quilt maker got tired.
Uh,
And it just
could
not
have.
quilted the same way. It's a very simple star design in the alternating blocks.
Mhm.
So this is a beautiful little mini 9 patch turned into a, what's that called? An Irish chain, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So I love
Yeah.
this one. Again, 30s fabrics. Having that red in the
It-
center and the red binding was really brilliant. They did a
Yeah.
beautiful job on
Yeah.
this quilt. I've always admired
Yeah.
it. I've always wanted to make another one. I don't know why. I've already got two beautiful 9 patch quilts, but I just think it's such a
Right. Right.
sweet and fun pattern. And it really calls out for some applique, don't you think?
Oh, see, I'm a machine quilter, and I
Yes.
love the open space.
Ah,
I
right, right,
really do.
right.
But I think that you would do a phenomenal job on that.
Well, this would be fun. So again, 30s fabrics, probably made in the 30s. No date,
Yeah.
no label. It's so disappointing
Yeah.
when you find a beautiful quilt like this and the history is lost. So your label
Yeah.
making class, that would be a wonderful thing for guilds to have you come
Yes.
and do, is a label making class. And I do one within my membership as well. I have one in the membership in that basic course that I teach
Hmm.
where I'm teaching applique. I don't just teach applique. There are more
Yeah.
techniques that you need for your applique quilts to make them last for the ages. So we talk about
Right.
bindings, we talk about labels and sleeves and all of those things in our workshops as
Right.
well. But I love that you're teaching this to quilt guilds because it's such an important skill and it's something that people, it's an afterthought. It's not something that people plan into their quilt.
Right.
Now,
Right.
Diana, I have a theory on labels. I always tell my students to put their label on the back before it's quilted. Is
Hmm.
that something that you see done?
Oh yes, I do. In fact, I
Yeah.
the last my magical garden that I quilted for a customer,
Yes.
she had
Yes.
put on the backing. She had stitched on her label, a beautiful elaborate label,
She
and
listened to me.
yep, and I stitched right over it. It will never come away. Everybody will
Perfect.
always know whose quilt that is.
Perfect. I love that. I love that the label can't be removed. It's an integral part of the quilt,
Yeah,
as it should be.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I ran
In my
into that
early
quilter
days.
recently. I
Oh,
ran
did
into
you?
that quilter recently, and she didn't have her quilt back yet. Does she have it back now?
Oh, yes, she does. Yes,
Oh,
yes, she
good.
does.
Oh,
Yeah,
excellent.
yeah,
Excellent. I can't wait to
yeah.
see
She
it.
was thrilled. She was thrilled. So
Good.
it came
Good.
out very beautiful.
But you're
It's
no
always
longer
fun.
taking you're no longer
I'm
taking in
not.
quilts for hire.
No, I'm not. But I can teach you. Let me show you how to do a quilt. Now, that isn't
I
showing as well as I would like
I
it to.
I can see it. It looks just beautiful, but yes, not as well as I'd like it to either. But look at all the colors in your stitching. Oh my goodness, that is gorgeous.
Yeah, it was. I wanted the back to look as good as the front, so it's a black on black back,
Mhm.
and all the colors that I used on the front, I used on the back. And
I
this
love
is
that.
this is my Bible to show people that you can do this. I did this on a long arm. There's nothing that I do on a long arm that you can't do on a domestic,
Okay,
and
that's good
that's
to know.
this is
Yeah,
what I
I
show often.
excellent. I teach a little bit of long arm, excuse me, of domestic machine quilting as well. And
Mhm.
as a I wouldn't say a novice, but as a intermediate machine quilter, I'm
Mhm.
able to get my students to a certain point. But I am not a
Right.
confident machine quilter that has a whole host of skills under my belt. You are. You are one of the most
Thank you.
amazing machine quilters that I know.
Uh,
And I would
Thank you.
love to show um, a more modern quilt. This is one that you quilted for me years ago. This is
Yes,
the
yes.
cover of my first book, Rotary Cut Applique with the Leaves Galore tools. And look at that basket weave. Look at that basket weave on that border print. That is just a labor of love, Diana. And I
It
love
was.
that you did this quilt for me because it is
Oh,
stunning and so beautifully,
it
beautifully
it was
done.
so much fun to do.
Oh,
It
I
really
love
was
it.
just so much fun to do. Your quilts are. I love applique too. It is so much fun to quilt your quilts.
Well, thank you. So, talking about applique quilts, seeing that that is my kind of my strong side, um, what is it about applique that you love, and how do you design your quilting designs to complement and not compete with the applique? Because your quilting does such a beautiful job to accentuate the
Oh,
applique and not compete with it.
thank you. Well, some of the things that I do is I stitch in the ditch
Mm,
religiously on all my
yes.
quilts, and I find that that will pop out the applique. I always use threads that blend. Even if I
Yes.
use a shiny thread that's going to show a little bit, I use a color that will blend in unless I'm trying to pop out an area.
Okay.
And that gives a lot of texture rather than competing with what's already there.
Yes, I can see a perfect example of that in the feathers here. You used a little bit
Hmm.
of a shiny thread.
Mm-hmm.
but it is the same color as that background. It blends beautifully with the background.
Right.
But when you went to that border print, you changed the color of the thread. You didn't just
Mm-hmm.
willy-nilly go and do all the same color thread. Now, you'll notice, or you might see, that the basket weave is in blue, and then the
Mm-hmm.
little lines down the side of that basket weave are in the same yellow color that you
Mm-hmm.
used in the background. So it is beautifully quilted with such attention to detail. And these are the types of skills that you could teach our quilters who are looking
Right.
to do their own beautiful machine quilting, whether it's on their domestic or on a long arm machine. It's that
Right.
attention to detail
Right.
that I love about your quilting.
Oh, thank
Well,
you.
I want to
Thank you.
invite people to ask questions in the chat. We don't have any questions yet for Diana. I think they're just, oh my gosh, absorbing in all of this fabulous information. So let's get back to where people can get hold of you. What if they wanted to do a class at their guild on, say, making labels for their quilts? Where would they get hold of you, Diana?
I can give you my email and my phone number.
Okay,
It's
I tell you what,
it's
why don't you go ahead and put that, just drop that in the comments. Can you get over to the comments, Diana, or do I need to do that?
let me see. Uh,
Okay.
I do not have comments on my
All right, so
screen.
don't give out your phone number, but go ahead and put your email at tell me your email address and I'll type that into the comments for you.
Sure. It's InStitches Quilts. InStitchesQuilts. And that's at AOL.com.
At AOL.com. All right. I will post that in the comments. So if anybody wants to get hold of
Okay.
Diana, InStitches Quilts at AOL.com. I'm actually going to show that right down on the bottom there. Oh, it has it
That
under
is
me
it.
instead of under you, but you get the idea. Um, let's see. I wish there were a way for me to fix that. Oh, it's just showing the comment. All right. So InStitchesQuilts at AOL.com. Now, are you active on Facebook or Instagram or any of those areas where people can get hold of you? I found you
I
on,
am.
I found you on LinkedIn.
Oh, yes, I'm
You're
on LinkedIn.
you're over on LinkedIn as well. And do you have a
Yeah.
Facebook page or is it a private Facebook?
It's both personal and business. So it's
All
just
in
under my
one.
name, Diana
Okay.
Reinhardt Annis.
Diana Reinhardt. Can you spell that for me?
Yep, ReinHardt.
RDT, Annis.
Yeah.
Okay, good, good. So if people follow you on um, Facebook, they will be able to get in hold of you that way as well. So I'm going to just type that again into the comments while you tell us a little bit more about some tips for collecting.
Oh, yes. I first was always told collect what you can afford, and that's always a good um, tip to have. I also I was collecting things that needed to they were projects, um,
Yes.
things with damage and that sort of thing. And I've actually gotten out of that because there's too many projects. I
Yes.
look for the condition is everything. I look for the best condition I can.
Okay, that's good to know. Did I spell that all right? Diana Reinhardt Annis on Facebook.
Nope, it's REI.
Sorry, I will take care of that right now. Thank you for that. Okay, so yeah, condition is everything, and I'm just going to try to. I'll just do it again. So yeah, that's something that I found. Of course, the fixer-uppers, just like buying a house, the fixer-uppers you can afford. Sometimes the really
Right,
beautiful quality quilts they're pricey. But I've noticed, Diana,
right.
that the price of quilts has decreased. Can you tell us a little bit about why?
Well, the market tanked in 2008. Excuse me. And it really hasn't come back up. And it's been a very long time. But I'm not, I can't say why it hasn't come up. I don't, I know that we have millennials who are not interested in collecting. They don't
Yes.
want stuff.
Mm.
This is stuff of their grandmothers, and they're just not interested. I have grandchildren of my own. I understand that, um, but um, I hope that eventually the market will help quilt sales and help prices to go up a little bit because right now often a quilt sells for less than it cost to make it. And
Yes.
that's just disheartening for those of us who make and sell quilts.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah,
so,
I don't sell my quilts, but it is disheartening when you get an appraisal back and
yes,
it's less than what you paid to make it. But
right,
but it's but our quilts are a labor of love, and I do them for
right,
myself. I don't do them to sell, so the appraisal doesn't matter all that much to me, except for in
right,
the case of replacement value. If that quilt were to
right.
get lost or stolen, if I'm sending it to a show, for example, and let's talk for a second about why you would get a quilt appraised. Why would you become an appraiser? Um, what's the market for appraisals? Why would people appraise their quilts?
Oh, there are lots of reasons. There is the don't insurance value for
Oh,
replacement.
that's
There,
a big one.
yeah, and if
Mm-hmm.
you're going to donate a quilt, it's good to for the donation, whoever it is, that they know what the value of that quilt is,
Mm.
and it's really good for curiosity. People want to know
Yes.
what their quilts are worth.
Yes.
Um, and it's good at end of life to have a quilt appraised because they can be put into the estate. Most insurance companies have no idea how to value a quilt, and we don't value them like they did in the 1800s and beyond when they were put in wills, and not
Yes.
just quilts, but all linens were put into the estate as having value. So
Yes.
those are big points. It's good to it's good to know so that your heirs don't throw everything out.
Right, because in our
um,
disposable world, um,
yeah,
the kids these days, but
right,
you know what I
right,
mean.
right.
This next
I
generation
do.
doesn't value um, linens and textiles the way that you and I do.
Right,
So yes,
right,
it's good to
right,
show them the value. So those
right.
are some wonderful reasons why to get your quilts insured. Now, when you do
Mm,
get your quilt insured, and you bring this valuation or this appraisal, you should really talk to your insurance company, right? We need to have these
right,
quilts protected in case of
right,
fire or loss. Because if I go to my
right.
insurance company today, they're going to tell me I lost a blanket that's worth $30. Is that true?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because they're not in the business of understanding quilts and textiles. They just don't. To have a valid appraisal done is going to be a guidance for the insurance company.
Hmm.
Now, not all insurance companies will bother. Some won't, some will, some do a lot. And it's always good to check with your own insurance company
Oh,
to
that's
find out,
really good information, Diana. Yeah,
yeah,
thank you
to
for
find
that.
out, how they would handle it.
Yeah. Now, as a business, of course, I have to handle that in a very different way, and I need to get all of my quilts appraised or the whole
Yeah,
collection appraised in order to
right,
actually put a rider on my insurance so that they are
right,
covered to
right,
their full value.
right.
And
And
yeah,
I've
I
done
need
the
to get
same.
that done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
need to get
I've done
that
the
done.
same.
Okay, so you've lit the fire under me. I really need to get that
Yeah.
taken care of. Yeah,
Yeah.
fantastic. Well, I have a couple of other gems here. Do you have any other gems to share?
Oh, let me see. Oh, I have this old quilt. Somebody gave me this quilt.
Oh, wow. Look at those stars.
Yeah, let me see if I
Look
can
at
get.
that soft.
Okay.
This is really a low volume quilt, isn't it? They were ahead of their time.
Very, very. Although I have to say, somebody gave this to me because it was in the cellar of someone who passed, and it was damp. It was so dirty, I couldn't see the stars. I had no
Really?
idea what I had. So I had to wash it. There was nothing I could do about that. And I washed it probably 3 or 4 times. Um,
Wow.
and I have had, and some of the stars show brilliantly. Um, the background is a French print, French floral print, and it is faded quite a bit, but
Yes.
it was much more brilliant in its time.
In its day.
Um, but it had to be cleaned. There was I had no choice, and thankfully I
Yes.
didn't put money into it. I had it looked at by several certified appraisers, and it's an 1840s quilt,
Oh, wow.
18 circa 1840. Um, all of the fabric is probably imported
Hmm.
because we weren't creating our own fabrics until I think the end of the 1830s, early 40s. Everything was shipped. All of our cotton was shipped to England. England would mill it and then sell it back to us.
Yes. And a similar thing happens
So
today, doesn't it? So that's
yeah,
very
yeah, it does.
interesting. So those are all imported fabrics, and my guess
They're all
is they
imported.
were very expensive. That was not a
They
quilt that
were.
was made
They
by a
were.
farmer on out of their shirts and old clothing, right? That was
There's
fabric
the
bought for
there's
that
an
purpose.
there's a letter by I believe it's Dolly Madison to her sister, and it wasn't considered polite conversation, but she did tell her um, sister in her letter that she had paid $6 for a yard of white plain cotton. She said, "We assume it's white," um,
Wow.
and
Six
that was
dollars.
1769.
What was
That
six
was
dollars worth in that time? That was priceless.
exactly much more than what
Wow.
we pay. Yeah, much more than
Absolutely.
how we're
There's
paying.
been a little
But
inflation since then.
yes, and of course,
That is,
I remember as a teenager buying fabric at Zayre's for 79 cents a yard. so
right,
so
right. So
she
that's
she
six
she
dollar
paid a
yard
lot.
fabric in the 1700s. That was some
It
precious
was
fabric.
exorbitant. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow. So probably only very, very wealthy women were making a quilt like the one that you just showed.
right,
Now this was 100
right,
years later, but still.
right. But it was still very expensive at that time.
Yeah, that's
Through the
amazing.
1800s, prices came down because we started milling our own
Yes.
fabrics.
Yeah.
So uh, we, you know, Slater Mill, whatever. I can't remember his first name, but Mr. Slater
Samuel Slater.
created the. Thank you. Samuel Slater created the first machine in the United States when he went to England and he studied the machines because they wouldn't allow any machines to be imported to the U.S.
Hmm.
Exported to the U.S. They he had all of those mechanisms in his head and
Yes.
brought it just in his head because he could have been punished by death. So it's those kinds of stories that just wrap around me. I love to hear all of this history and how things evolved throughout the
Have you
years.
been
It's
have you been to the Slater Mill in Pawtucket?
Once. Yeah, I do
Okay.
need to go back.
You and I should go back again.
Yes,
That would
yes.
great
Yeah.
road trip. Great road trip. Well, speaking of road
Yeah.
trips, I'm heading down to Virginia this week to go see Bonnie Hunter's place. We're going to Quiltville. I'm so excited.
Oh,
And
how fun.
yes, and I'm going with a group of ladies that I have yet to meet, and some of them are quilt historians. So I'm going to bring a
Oh,
selection of these quilts down with me. So maybe you could recommend to me which quilts you think I should bring. So I have this beautiful star quilt, which I know that you
oh,
admired,
yes.
and it is in
Yeah,
rough shape. It is in rough shape, but
but that's
um,
okay.
yes, it's a red, white, and blue. It's absolutely stunning. So I might just bring them all, but I think that this is one that they would enjoy seeing.
Yes.
Then I have this beautiful quilt, which has, again, a lot of those um, double pinks in here.
Yep.
It's got a lot of the browns, but look at that
Right.
beautiful fabric in the
Oh,
sashing.
that stripe. That is gorgeous.
Isn't that
Oh, how
beautiful?
nice. Yeah.
And this one is, again, a top in beautiful condition. This all came from
Great.
one gentleman on Facebook. And I actually wrote to him and I said, can you give me a little more history? So I have the name of his aunt that
Oh,
supposedly
nice.
made these quilts. And Diana, I left one with you too, and that would be the same
Yes.
maker. So I have that information. And
I love that. Thank you.
I love this
Yeah.
one. I love this one. Let me show
Yes.
this one a little bit better because what I love about this is the frugality. Look at that block and
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
those different prints used in it. And one of the squares in the background square is pieced. Here it is. Okay, two of them.
Oh, yes. I see that a lot in antique quilts and quilt tops, and that just endears me to them to see how they use their scraps. I've done it in my own.
To replicate what they did.
Just because, well, it gave me permission. But when
Yeah,
I was,
yes.
when I was running out of fabric,
Okay.
I would piece the pieces that I had together. Oh, and
Sure.
the black fabric in that. Can you show that to me? Oh, yes. That looks
Oh,
like a morning print.
yes, yes, exactly.
Now,
Tell us what a
a
morning print is.
morning print is Mourning, and it was there were morning prints after Prince Albert died. Um, Queen Victoria um, went into mourning for the rest of her life. And so
Wow.
morning prints became very, very popular. You had you had morning prints, half morning prints, light morning prints. Um, she dressed in black for the rest of her life. It was
Wow.
over 60 years, I believe, and they're just very popular in these that time period.
So what time period are we
It's fun
talking
to see.
about? We've got the double pinks in
Victorian.
here.
It's probably the last
Oh, no,
20
I'm
years.
sorry. I don't think that this is the double pink. I'm sorry.
No, no, that one
No,
isn't.
no,
But
that's an
the
older
morning
one. Yeah.
print and the browns will tell you that it is from the last quarter of the 1800s.
Wow. Okay. So that's a
Mm,
treasure, even though it is terribly
yeah,
stained, in terrible condition. To me, it's still a treasure just because of the
it
fabric.
is. We all have spots as we age.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. So, which of those quilts do you think would be of most interest to my quilt historian friends that I haven't met yet? Or
Oh,
should I just bring them all?
any, I'd bring them all.
Okay, okay. I will
You
load
know,
up my car.
being a
I
historian, I I I look at I can't get enough of quilts. I
okay.
can't get enough of antique quilts and vintage quilts. I collect a lot of 30s, 40s, 20s. Um, turn of the century, turn of 1900. Those are just my favorites. I cannot get enough of them. I just
Okay.
love them.
Okay, so I'll bring a whole collection. I'm going to fill the cart with quilts, and I'm going to show you one more that I'm not sure I've ever
Yeah.
shown you before. This one was a gem that I picked up at my local thrift store. Still has the tag on it. $55.
Oh gosh.
Okay, and
Wow.
this is the most
That's a steal.
exquisite
Oh.
machine quilted,
Yeah.
beautifully
Wow.
done hexie quilt. And I
Wow.
almost didn't buy it. And you know why? Because I hated the border. But then I said, you know what? This is this quilt's history.
That's right.
Somebody made it with this candle wicking border, and
Right.
I need to cherish that. And they machine appliqued the hexies
Around the edge. Yeah.
onto that border. And the fact that it
Wow.
was done by machine was precious to me.
Yeah.
Every one of these hexies was outlined with machine quilting. Every single 1-inch hexie is outlined with machine quilting. It is just stunning, and it's a summer quilt. There is,
No batting.
I don't think
No,
so. I don't
that's
think there's
nice.
any batting
It,
in there. So it's quite a
hold
treasure
it
to
up to a
me.
light. Hold it up to a
Oh,
light because that will you'll be able to see through the fabric and that will help you understand
yeah. I don't
if
think
there's
that
any
there's any
batting in there.
batting.
Yeah.
There's some
Yeah.
thickness, but I think that's just because of the thickness of the fabrics themselves. So,
Could be flannel. It was pretty
okay.
popular to put flannel in too.
Well, I'll bring this the next time I see you, Diana, and we can discover that together. Diana, this has
Yes.
been fascinating, but we are out of time. But I'm so thrilled that I got to catch up with my dear friend and learn so much about appraising and dating quilts. I've got some great tips. If, with your
Yeah.
permission, I'll repeat some of those tips in my newsletter this week. So if you
Great.
are not on my email list, ladies and gentlemen, you can join the email list at SuePellinDesigns.com. I put out a newsletter every Friday. So go ahead and share this interview if you think that people should know more about these beautiful old quilts. If you think people should know more about labeling their quilts and getting them appraised for insurance
Mhm.
value as well as for other reasons, share this interview, like this interview, and I would love if you come back to Sewing in Slippers with Sue every Tuesday, where I dive into interviews once a month as well as making my own quilts. You get to be a little fly on the wall as I design my own applique quilts. So Diana, it's been so much fun having you here. I
Yes.
think another trip to Brimfield is in our
Yes.
future.
Yes.
And I didn't show this last little gem that I bought in Brimfield. It's another sweet little 30s print with that,
Yeah.
what did you call it? A coffin pattern,
Coffin. Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Yeah, I just
Yes.
love that shape. I love that it is a tied little quilt. And this was a little gem that we picked up when we took our trip to Brimfield. So thank you for that. I'm dying to go again. You're my only
Me
friend that
too.
will go to Brimfield with me. It's been such
I
a
love
pleasure,
it.
Diana.
Oh, thank you
Thank you
for
so
having
much for
me.
being here. Thank you so much for being here. It was so much fun. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.